second.
Yeah,
It's
just
not
pause.
immediate.
Yeah.
And how do we? And hopefully people will be able to hear me. I guess if I'm a little quiet, I'll go closer to the mic
Okay.
and make it more.
They'll turn you up too.
Yeah.
You wanted a Ricola.
I did, but
Oh yeah,
no
I'd
rush.
love one.
Yeah. 2 dose.
5 minutes.
Make it 10.
It's not that long. It's really short. It's not going to be 10.
Do you think we're gonna just be under?
It's okay. People will just have a longer break. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey guys, do you want to move down a little so we can all be closer? We're all friends now. Please. Just makes us feel like we've got more of an audience. I'm just kidding.
Good. How are you? We've just colonized. Very hospitable. It's a little cold. We're doing a geek show. Yeah. But the pizza is right. Hopefully, yeah. So we'll see.
Hey man. Anyone intro us or we just I don't know. Cool. Everybody should know who you are. Yeah, this conference is known for its swag. Yeah. Perfect. Did you have a partner? Any presenters and stuff? I was just saying. That's why I asked.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Let's try it again. Good morning, everybody. There we go. I just wanted to make sure you'd had some caffeine, your energy was up. My name is Linda Deakin. I'm a partner at IDEO and the managing director of our Design for Food team. We are going to have a fun activity today. So thank you for signing up for this breakout session. Did everybody sign their waiver on the way in? No? And safety goggles? No, we're actually going to have a lot of fun. We're going to dive a little deeper into consumers and how you can work with consumers to make your ideas stronger and build empathy for who you're designing for. You know, Matt unpacked this a little bit in the last presentation and really talked to why it's important to understand deep human needs and begin to use that to be able to create more meaningful products and services. So that's what we're going to dive into today. So before we get into the fun activity, I wanted to give you a quick overview of how we approach design research at IDEO and how we engage designers in the design process. Consumers in the design process. Where's the clicker? So at IDEO, we often refer to this quote. I'm sure many of you know this. The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And this is from William Gibson, a science fiction author. And so we gain inspiration from this quote. The way that we think about it is it's really interesting to look at the edges for inspiration because a lot of the time they're exhibiting behaviors or they have extreme motivations that we can use to sort of give us glimpses of what the future might look like. And so oftentimes when we're recruiting, we're looking for those more extreme behaviors that we might be able to draw inspiration from. For us, design research is really about learning. It's, understanding unmet human needs that's going to inform our design. It's not about testing. In fact, it's completely the opposite of testing. We're trying to listen to consumers, understand their needs, learn from what they're saying, and then use that to incorporate into our designs to make them better and to make them stronger. Oftentimes, the things that we put in front of consumers help us understand what those needs are and help us understand how we can better design for those needs. A common myth is that design research is market research, and they're very different, and we use them very differently. And there is a time for market research to take place, and there is a time for design research to take place. Design research is much earlier on in the process, where you're trying to gain those early insights and try and understand what some of those latent needs are that you're designing for. So, when you think about traditional market research, oftentimes it's great at helping you improve existing things, but what design research is great at is inspiring new possibilities and helping you think beyond the object you're actually designing into more broader landscapes that you might begin to design for. Another big difference is that we're not in a two-way mirror setting, we're in natural contexts, and we're doing that on purpose because we really want to see how people behave, how they feel within that natural context. So it might be following them through a grocery store if we're trying to understand how they make purchase decisions. It might be with their kids when they go shopping because that's their typical constraints, that's their context for how they do grocery shopping. So for us, it's really important to understand that mindset and to build real empathy for those moments that they go through and to see the frustrations that they struggle with in those contexts. For us, it's not also about a static interview. It's not an interview guide that we stick to rigidly. It's about a dynamic conversation and actually seeing where the consumer takes things. They might understand and unlock things that we wouldn't get to by ourselves. So not following that strict interview guide, but letting the consumer lead us to new and inspiring places. I mentioned this a little bit around the William Gibson quote. We look for extremes. So, when we think about a bell curve, we're looking for the people that sit on the edges of that bell curve. And the reason we do that is, as I mentioned, they're exhibiting extreme behavior. Their motivations are probably a little bit more extreme. But the interesting thing is that they're also able to articulate why they do what they do. If we speak to the people in the middle of the bell curve, it's usually kind of shrug of shoulders like, I'm not sure, it's just what I do. But if you talk to those extremes, they often are fanatics in some way, and they have these extreme behaviors that they can articulate why they're doing what they're doing. So for us, they become the real light posts for future behaviors that might become mainstream. A lot of times these extreme behaviors do dial down and they become more mainstream over time. So if we're trying to design for something that's 5, 10, 15 years out, looking at those extreme behaviors really helps us get a sense of what those new behaviors and motivations might be over time. At IDEO, we talk about human-centered design, and we're always trying to build empathy. But one of those things is that empathy is not just for the end consumer, right? It's for whoever we're designing for. And so if we're designing a new product or a new experience, there's a lot of people that touch that new product or experience along the way. So we want to understand every stakeholder and how it impacts them. So it could be a server, it could be a store operator or a store manager. We really want to understand how is what we're designing going to impact the needs of every stakeholder along the journey. So for us, it's really about building empathy for each one of those and making sure that the design hits on those needs at every touch point. At IDEO, we're really good at practicing both active and passive listening. So, we do go in with an interview guide. We don't stick to it because we want to see where consumers go. But what we want to see is sort of how consumers behave. If they say to us that, they're strictly healthy eater and they only buy gluten-free and non-GMO, and then we open their cupboards and their cupboards say something different, we really want to understand the difference between, their real self that we're seeing in the cupboards and that aspirational self that they're trying to play to us. And so for us, that's where those tensions between aspirational self and real self, that's an opportunity for design, and where design can really play a role in helping them bridge that gap and helping them feel better about the choices that they're making. So very important for us to be in context, actively listening and actively pursuing to try and understand what people are doing, as well as poking around in people's cupboards to see the reality of their lives. At IDEO, we have a phrase called "we build to think," and so this is really about prototyping. Prototyping is at our core, it's in our DNA at IDEO, and we never turn up to a conversation with a consumer or with a client, actually, without a prototype in hand. And it's not because we think the prototype is the right idea, it's because the prototype is a vehicle to get deeper into what the needs might be. So it moves the conversation with a consumer or a client from a very abstract place into a very tangible place quite quickly. And again, those prototypes are not about testing, they're to help our learning. They're to help us identify what the needs might be in that space and what the opportunity space overall might be. All right. We're going to have some fun. Those are some of the really quick, high-level, basic principles of how we approach design research at IDEO. And today's session, we're going to give you a really quick deep dive into what we do in our research. We don't normally do it in this format, like this, that we're going to do today. But what we want to show you is why getting close with individuals, understanding their individual needs, is going to help you really build empathy for them as individuals and help you build stronger outcomes. And unless you take the time to really spend time one-on-one with individuals, you never know what you're going to highlight. And there could be some real great insights that you uncover through going through this exercise. So, what I want to do okay, I'm going to introduce you to our game show hosts. Come on in, guys. Sandeep and Chioma. So Sandeep nerds out on business models at IDEO. He makes a mean cocktail and can bust out Notorious B.I.G. from memory. Woo. He can, I've heard it. Chioma is obsessed with getting curious about the daily details around consumers' lives. She's a design researcher. Her first love is gluten. Her second love is also gluten. Oh, and she happens to be a baker. All right, over to you guys.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Linda. How's everybody feeling today? Awesome. Are you ready to do some empathizing with us? Sandeep, what are we going to do today?
All right, so we're going to play a game show with you all, and here's how it's going to work. We're going to ask you all some questions that are going to relate to three wonderful people who are going to join us out here in a minute. We're going to tell you a little bit about them, but the purpose of this game is to guess a little bit more about what you think that these people might have said to the questions that are going to show up on the screen. So you all took your phones out a few minutes ago. You're all ready to go on slido.com, and then you enter your code RTF17. And then what's going to happen is while we ask you all the questions, we're going to see how you all responded and tell you what was right or what was wrong. So if you all got the question right, you will hear this sound.
Let me demonstrate for you.
That's actually, if you got the question wrong, you'll hear that sound.
Oh.
And
Don't
if
worry,
you
I'm
get
going to get it right when we get to it, so it's going to be no problem.
If you get the question right, you'll hear that sound. Okay?
That's what you'll hear mainly, so don't worry.
Okay, so should we bring on our contestants?
I think we should.
Okay. Tessa is an architect and a San Francisco native. She lives on her own in Nob Hill. She recently traveled to Morocco with her family, where she explored new spices that she's been enjoying incorporating into her cooking. When it comes to eating healthy, she believes it's all about fresh, delicious, and colorful foods. If there was one food she could eat without repercussions, it would be cheese. All the cheese. Contestant number 2 is Natalie. Natalie is the mother of 2 twin 9-month-old girls. She's the daughter of what she describes as a hemp milk granola cruncher and a junk foodaholic. She aims for balance between those two things. Her husband is from Kansas and introduced her to foods she didn't even know existed, like instant Lipton soup packets. She doesn't know why you would eat any food with chemicals you can't pronounce, but she has a big sweet tooth, and she'll be loyal to any brand that makes a mean eggnog. Give it up for Natalie. Last but not least, we have Giovanni, a mechanical engineer originally from Italy. He moved to San Francisco 3 years ago. He loves food, and he has perfected his nightly pasta pomodoro recipe. His mother told him that pasta made in America isn't the same, And even though that might not be true, he errs on the side of caution and uses Canadian-made Berea half the time and DiCecco the other half of the time. He did not know that Berea, there are people from Berea here today, so maybe you can meet them later. Wouldn't that be fun for you? He does not like sweets, not even chocolate, and he buys his groceries at any of the overpriced organic food places in the Mission District where he lives. Give it up for Giovanni. Okay, so we're going to switch over to Slido and start with our first question.
Okay, so does everybody have their phone handy? Great. So the first question is about Tessa. So we want you to guess what Tessa thinks. So Tessa loves Trader Joe's. Is it because it has affordable and healthy options? It's a joy to shop there? Free samples? Or it's 2 blocks away from her house? So you pick the one that you think is right. We're going to see that tabulate. Oh, I love this.
This is awesome. 50 responses. I think we're good at 50.
Okay. Wow. So we got 47% says A. Let's see if I get this right here. Great work, guys. Good start.
So Tessa, tell us a little bit more about why you love Trader Joe's.
It's on now? Perfect. I love Trader Joe's because I feel like it's a wonderful option in San Francisco that has price points that are a little bit cheaper than some of the boutique markets or Whole Foods that allows me to go shopping in a very friendly environment that has healthy options, provides me with access to healthy food and interesting varieties. I love that they have a mission to be able to serve or to be able to have different local options that are available, and I really appreciate that there are a couple of new Trader Joe's that have opened recently to allow access to more healthy food around San Francisco and the Bay Area. So I love that. I also do love the free samples. I was telling Chio, I was like, I don't know. She's like, 1 or 2. I was like, yeah, I mean, of course, like healthy and affordable is important, but I always get the free sample when I go there. So many times I've made or bought the option that they have at the free sample. It's such great inspiration. So Trader Joe's and I have a very strong, loving relationship. So I'm glad you added this question in. Thank you for including it.
Awesome.
And good responses.
So one thing that we didn't mention is if you guys have questions for our contestants as you're going through, you can add them in Slido, and if we have time at the end, then we'll be able to ask questions to the participants. So we're going to move on to the next question. All right. One of our participants loves a brand because they trust it completely. That brand is A, Cliff, B, Chipotle, C, Hershey's, or D, Ben & Jerry's? Let's see what the survey says. We know there are at least 50 of you now, so yeah, we're going to wait for that. Uh-oh. Oh, come on, guys. We need a tie break. Who's not on their phones?
There you go.
All right. 40% at Cliff Bar. Oh. All right. Sorry, guys. You had a really great start, but let's hear about it.
Natalie, tell us a little bit why you trust Hershey's and what you love so much about Reese's Cups.
My mouth trusts them. I know they're not like the bestest company, obviously, but my tongue and mouth are really on board about it. Same with the Mars Corporation. Love them and everything they make, Snickers. I like, well, it's a very visceral thing. I don't have to think too much about why I like it. I just do when you taste it, you know.
When was the first time you had a Reese's Cup that you can remember?
Man, who knows? I don't know. But I do eat literally a Snickers every day. Legit. Yeah. Like, I went on a diet recently, and it was like 1,500 calories, and I made sure that I ate only so that I would allow that other 250 for the Snickers. So I could have picked something more nutritionally dense. Didn't.
Well,
Yeah.
when you're hangry, you should grab a Snickers.
It really does help. It's like the healthiest of candy bars. It's got protein, fats, carbohydrates. Like, if you're looking to bulk up a little.
Natalie, have you tried those new Reese's peanut butter cups that have the pieces inside of them?
Those are shit. Don't. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cuss, but
I brought you a gift.
Oh, no.
But she said they're shit. So we're just gonna move on. Let's move on.
All right, to the next question. This one's about Tessa again, so let's see if you can guess right one more time. Why does Tessa get groceries from 3 different sources? Is it to get inspired because variety is the spice of life? Is it to shop around for the best price? Is it because no store meets all her needs? Or is it because of convenience? Life is short. Get food when you can. All right, it looks like you think you know Tessa. Let's see.
That was a softball. So Tessa, tell us a little bit about the other 2 places you love to shop besides Trader Joe's, Instacart, and Good Eggs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in an apartment in San Francisco, and I don't typically drive, so I have found Good Eggs and Instacart to be really great alternatives. Good Eggs is great because it both provides local produce delivery and food kits. So their motto is everything that you buy was picked yesterday or caught today, harvested very soon and delivered here. So when I think of if it had been 5, even 3 years ago, the idea of getting food delivered to our box, I would have thought, no, not at all. But I love that their mission is just to really elevate and lift local farmers and producers in the area. It's super affordable. They have like all these like promotions when you first join, so it starts to be really cheap and then escalates. Yeah, and I love it. But then and also their dinner kits I felt have been like really inspiring. I didn't know what to imagine, but they are very flavorful. Foods from many different countries. They're so easy to make, so I found that really fun. I love variety in the foods that I eat, so I found it to be exciting. And then Instacart is great when I just want to like bulk up on things, and they just kind of get delivered to your house. All of a sudden you come home and you have like all your groceries there, and heavy things and things that you can just have for a long time. So I found Instacart to be a productive way to do some of the bulk grocery shopping, but I love to go to the grocery store and little boutiques to find fresh produce and other things that I love. But I find that as a way to be able to supplement everything else that I want in my home. And so I'm appreciative for the technology and innovation that has come with apps to be able to provide all that food and inspiration in my home.
I think one of the things that we know from our work is seeing retailers talk about how their baskets have decreased. And oftentimes they're looking about what's happening within their 4 walls and not really thinking about what's happening in the bigger macro trends of things. And I think when you have an opportunity to talk to somebody and really get to know them and understand their behavior, you could see how if we had a client that was a Midwestern retailer that hasn't really entered the online space, how you might want to come to a place like San Francisco where the basket, that myth of the one big basket has gone away, and it's now a bunch of different baskets from different places, and take inspiration from somebody like Tessa to think about how you might design a solution that works. In other parts of the country, that behavior might not be as prevalent.
No, that's a good point, because I feel like when I go to the grocery store, my objective is always, how do I make my cart the most colorful? I want it all to be fruits and vegetables and fun things, and I have other apps and Instagram or Instacart and other alternatives to be able to get all the bulk stuff. But it's absolutely, there's a distinction between what I find myself buying in store and what myself buying online or through applications.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, let's see if you guys get the next question. One of our participants doesn't like eating at big chain restaurants. Is it because the meat is full of hormones? they're totally unhealthy, the food tastes like it came out of the back of a food service truck, or the food doesn't have any real cultural identity. Let's see what you say. We've got 34. I know there are more of you out there. You revealed yourself earlier. When we get to 50, that's when we got it.
Boom.
Okay, awesome. So the answer, food doesn't have any real cultural identity. Sorry, guys. You can't get all of them.
So, Giovanni, tell us about why the correct answer here was that their food tastes like it came out of the back of a food service truck. And can you elaborate a little bit on what you meant about that, what you thought it meant about the American food system?
Yeah, right. So it's one of the great things, and one of the things that I hate about traveling in the U.S. is that you can be pretty much anywhere from the coast to coast, and you can get very similar foods. And so in a sense, that is similar to what you guys guessed about the cultural identity, but more than that, it's kind of the frustration that, all these people, you guys know my name, that, throughout all these people, everyone eats the same food, and it's, kind of lacks any kind of spirit, because I'm originally from Italy, as you might have guessed, and there, sometimes it gets a little bit tiring, but every town you go to, food has a story, the people, talks to the land, there's a reason that every town has its food history. Whereas here, it's sometimes you go and it can be comforting because you know what to expect, but it can also be kind of boring and say, oh, okay, you know exactly what to do, so what to expect, and it gets a little bit tiring.
Yeah, so when we asked Giovanni about whether there was a place that he didn't want to eat, he gave an answer, and we could have just taken that at face value and be like, okay, well, you don't like to eat at this place, you make a joke or say it tastes like it comes out of the back of a food service truck. And in our process, what we want to do when we hear information like that is get a little bit deeper, because it's not particularly generative. It's your opinion, and that's awesome. But, okay, we know that you don't like to eat at that place, but the real question that we want to get to is, well, why is that? So that you can reveal an opportunity. And what Giovanni said afterwards is actually a really interesting point, that it's both a really beautiful part of our food system and also like a maybe cold and uninspiring part of our food system, that you can get the same thing anywhere. But what it really reveals is a set of emotional needs that you can design for. It's much more generative. So it's not even saying that there should necessarily be a change for the restaurant that he had in mind, but instead it's an opportunity to connect with consumers around some of what these actual needs are, which might be, you know, to have something familiar and really play up that experience for people, or on the other hand, make something that's uniform and feel a little bit less cold and less unfamiliar.
Yeah, and I would say similarly, sometimes when we go out and do research, if we met Giovanni in his home, we might actually have one of those big food clients with us in the room and talking with Giovanni and not revealing that they're from that place. And sometimes that can be hard for us not to want to, or it can be hard for us to want to censor that information and play it back to our client. But it actually turns out to be the most powerful thing for our clients, hearing people who may have been their customer in the past who aren't anymore, and understanding why. And it becomes this moment of validation, because they oftentimes know that there's something wrong, but nobody has given it a voice. I mean, you can actually give a real human that voice. It creates a lot of power, and it creates a lot of drive for them to actually do things differently. And so you can imagine what it might mean for a big restaurant chain to start thinking about how they might make their offer more local, and what it might look like in San Francisco versus Memphis, and how you might play up these two different regions and bring some more of that flavor back to a big chain.
Awesome. Are you guys ready for the next question? All right. So why does Natalie love Bob's Donuts? That's a donut shop in San Francisco, if you don't know. Is it because you can taste the trans fats? Because it's a San Francisco institution? Because it's around the corner from her house? Or because it employs people from the local community? Who here has had Bob's Donuts? Yeah, they're really good. If you haven't, it's worth it.
One other question. Raise your hand if you're a old-fashioned donut person versus a yeast. Okay, yeast donut people? Old-fashioned, I agree. Would you say?
All right, so it looks
Fluffy
like
ones?
most people
Fluffy
say
is
it's
used.
because it's a
Old-fashioned
San
is
Francisco institution. Natalie, tell us, what is it that you love about Bob's Donuts?
Don't sue me, but I can taste something extra in there. I've looked at all of their flowers in the back. I'm like, where is the trans fats? Like, where is it? I can taste something extra in the dough. And I've tasted a lot of donuts, like fancy donuts, voodoo donuts, Johnny's donuts, donuts from like the crack house next door, all kinds of donuts. But I've had the healthy artisan, small batch, whatever, free range donuts. And they're not as fluffy. They're a little harder. They don't fry well, maybe. I don't know. They taste kind of like when you have the baked Cheetos versus the real Cheetos. I definitely crave the extra, don't sue me, trans fats of that donut.
So, Natalie, you tell us a funny story about your favorite flavor of donut, maple donuts.
Oh, maple donuts. I was pregnant recently with those twins. And I discovered maple flavoring is not maple at all. It's fenugreek, and it boosts your lactation. So if you're making milk, guys, get some maple donuts, because it's not maple. And I feel like the artisanal free-range donuts, they might actually pay extra and put real maple stuff in there. Who knows? But the trans fat ones at Bob's are definitely fenugreek. Yeah. So if you want lactation needs, get the Bob's ones.
We're also here to teach you new things today. If you're lactating, please get the fenugreek maple donuts. Jill, let's go to the next question.
Oh, man. All right, yeah. So this should be an easy question for you guys to make up for the last one. How many of the participants on this stage have eaten at a Michelin star restaurant? 1, 2, 3, or all? None? Okay. 51.
Ooh.
Oh. Let's see. Okay. All right, I'm going to call it. You heard it. You knew it was coming. Actually, everybody here has been to a Michelin restaurant. So we're going to ask some questions. Sandeep?
Yeah, so why don't we go Tessa first?
Yeah, thank you. I have been, so I think when we had our initial conversation, I come from a family that loves food, the culture of food. My family is half Brazilian, half Ugandan. So come from a really big family. Food has always been a part of the culture. Come from a tradition of a lot of chefs and those who, like us, recreation, love food. So my first experience, I'm the youngest of a big family, was in New York. And I remember being so impressed by the way in which food was presented, and that food can be design and that food can be innovation. And I love design. I'm an architect, and I thought it was so cool to be able to understand the way that the chef works. So that was something that was really interesting to me and really cool. And what I will say is that when we were back there right before this, we were talking about our favorite chefs, our favorite restaurants we've been to, shows that we watched. So all of us are like really excited about that. San Francisco has now become the city in the United States with the area in the United States with the most Michelin star restaurants, so that's really exciting. Both my brother and sister live in New York, so that's been like bragging rights, but yeah. So it's fun, and the couple that I've been to, the few I've been to in San Francisco have always been memorable, more for special occasions. Yeah, so.
Let's go Giovanni.
All right.
Tell us your story.
Yeah.
About my story at Story. So I went to this restaurant called Story in London with, it was maybe a year ago or so, with my brother and his boss invited us out. And And I think that was the first first Michelin-starred restaurant that I've gone to, and it was a great place. It was actually in the old lavatories in London. And you walk in, and the first thing they do is they lit the candle on the table. And, you know, I can remember it was a tasting menu of a dozen or so, you know, little meals. And right when you sat down, they lit up the candle, and, you know, you go through your meal, you forget about the candle. And at the end, the last course, before the dessert, they give you a piece of bread, and they make you dip the bread into the candle wax, which was actually, I can't remember what animal it was from, but it was the fat of tallow.
So did you all think you'd hear 2 candle tallow stories this weekend? So Giovanni doesn't know this, but somebody else shared a similar story yesterday. 2 for the price of 1, people. Thank you, Giovanni. And Natalie, you were going to tell us about an experience you had, and you likened it to going to the opera.
I do eat normal food sometimes, like real food, not candy. I went to Lazy Bear. That's one of the, I've been to a lot of them. I basically just buy the booklet, and I'm a food tourist of sorts. And Lazy Bear seems, it was good. Seemed kind of like, well, when you go to all of these things, it seems like you can buy tickets to go see the Nutcracker, or you can buy tickets to get served like amazing food, and it's all really, you can tell they like thought of everything, and it's very orchestrated the way each thing comes, and it seems it's very artistic, not just like how they made the food, but how they present the food, how they pair everything. It's I mean, I know some people are like, it's such a silver price to like pay $700 to go like eat forever, but it's so much more than that, because that's like what you would pay to go see the Warriors nowadays or any other thing, and it's like an experience you take for the rest of your life. So I mean, in that way, it's a whole experience. It's not, you know, it's like going to see Cher, like any other thing. You know, it's not just food, guys.
Yeah. And thanks so much for that, Natalie. And those of you who were in the audience yesterday at the beginning of the conference, I think this is really evocative of some of the things we heard people present. You know, when Eve was mentioning, we spend so much of our lives understimulated, that food and food experiences are things that allow us to be tactile and get away from just being in front of a screen, or even some of the insights that Google presented around families and how they're eating as experiences. And honestly, in the work that we do in our food group, we hear that a lot, so it's a pretty common sentiment of people considering food beyond just what they're eating, just like you said, and looking for an experiential component of that.
Let's go to the next question.
Yeah. So let's see if you redeem yourself on this question. Which of the following popular diets has not been tried by one of our consumers? So the first one, intermittent fasting. The second, veganism. The third, gluten-free. And the final one, Whole30.
What is Whole30?
Yeah.
Great question.
We'll ask that question later. Intermittent fasting looks like it's winning, but we're missing, oh yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Is Whole30 going to make a run for it? Late game surge? Oh,
Whoa.
man. Did everybody
Ooh.
vote? Are you ready? Okay.
Voting is so
It's
important.
done.
So important.
Oh, my God.
Thank you,
Today
Tessa.
and
Is there
on
an-
November 7th.
We're at 31. It's a top.
Oh,
All right. Okay.
Whole30.
All right.
Coming in hot.
Sorry, guys. The real answer is gluten-free.
Giovanni, tell us about... Oh, no, sorry. Was it Giovanni?
Giovanni can tell us
Giovanni.
about veganism.
Yeah, actually, it was, again, I went to visit my brother, and maybe it was after that candle, I don't know, but him and his girlfriend decided to go vegan, and so I didn't really have a choice, because, I mean, I did have a choice, I could go out and eat, but I was like, oh, I'm here for a couple of weeks, so I'll try it out, and it was okay. I mean, I think it was okay because I knew there was an end to it, and I could come back to my regular routine. And not that I'm, eat steak every night, but still, there are those products, meat-based products that I do enjoy. So yeah, I tried vegans for a couple of weeks, and I was surprised how cheap it is. That was one thing that really stuck with me. I mean, beans and lentils are super cheap, and it was good. It was a good experience.
So what have you carried on from that? Because you talked a little bit about some things have stuck with you from that experience.
Not much, actually. No, I mean, budget's tight, I guess, yeah, beans and lentils, but no, I mean, yeah, not very much. I mean, I don't consume that much meat regularly, so yeah, try to do it responsibly.
Cool. Tessa, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Whole30. I think some people asked what was Whole30, so maybe you can start with that.
And I'm not an expert. I'm sure there are other people here, but Whole30 essentially tries to enable to have to eliminate carbohydrates, cheese, really focus on meats and vegetables and fruits, and anything that's come from the ground, essentially. I did it a little bit when I was training for the San Francisco Marathon, but mainly as an inspiration. I was like, I don't think that this is something that I can sustain. So yeah, I enjoyed the process. It has transformed the way that I eat, to make sure that I'm understanding that I'm eating whole proteins, and making sure that the food I eat is more fresh. I'm not a big red meat consumer, so I usually eat a lot of lean proteins and seafood. So I think that was one of the hardest things with Whole30 is in order for me to get as much energy that I needed, I had to really focus on that. So that's kind of why I transitioned away from it. But because I love dairy and you can't have dairy in it. So.
All the cheese.
All the cheese.
Cheese.
Okay. So, our next question, who uses a food-related app every single day? So now you've heard from all of our contestants. So is it Tessa, Giovanni, Natalie, or all of them? Okay, is everyone going to make a late game surge like the last round?
Look at this.
Yeah, here we go.
I'll call it a comeback. I've been here for years. A lot of LL Cool J fans in the house.
All right. Well, it looks like your guess is Tessa.
Close call, though. Close call. It was everyone.
Yeah, everybody.
So I think we've heard a couple of the apps you use. So Tessa, tell us, the third app you mentioned when we talked to you was Yumly. So tell us a little bit about why you use Yumly.
Yeah. I love Yumly. I'll be super brief. It's an app where you're able to, there are many uses of Yumly, but I love that you're able to put in ingredients that you have in your house, and that they will provide you with an amazing, delicious recipe that you could discover from that. So I think it's really incredible. It's great for inspiration. So you say, I want to make something with this, this, and that. And they have millions of recipes that can allow you to get there. Really beautifully designed. Really, I think it works very well. And I love being able to just have that as a resource to understand things that I can make that are easy and cheap and are things that I already have in my house.
Cool. How about you, Natalie? What app are you, or apps are you using regularly? We're going to give you the mic.
I use Caviar a lot, Postmates, Good Eggs, Goldbelly, Yelp, Grubhub. I have all of them, all of them. Like, if it will get me food, I will download it.
Which is the one that you use the most?
I use Caviar a lot and Postmates, mostly equally, mainly because they can get me things that are just not on the other apps. I think it's a little pricier, but you're more likely to get something worth eating. Yeah.
So tell us about the last time you used Grubhub then, and why did you use Grubhub?
I used Grubhub to get Henry's Hunan. I think that was last week. It was a sodium binge. It's not what I would have gotten on Caviar at all. You can get things that are way healthier and nicer on caviar.
You needed that fix. We've all been there.
Yeah. I usually eat Chinese food when I'm sad.
Again, more callbacks to yesterday. We're not going to make them super explicit here, but Giovanni, what was the food app that you use really often?
Every day actually, the New York Times cooking app, and actually I don't even use it to get recipes. I don't think, maybe I followed one recipe vaguely, but I just use it kind of when I'm just like laying there, and the last thing on my phone to check is New York Times cooking app, and they always have updates like, random things, maybe, based on the season, like, maybe now they have pumpkin things. I don't think I even own any pumpkin jars in my kitchen, but I just look at it and say, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So we'll move to the next question, which is our last one. Oh, okay. Second last one. All right. So which of the following things is something that was not purchased online by one of our guests up on the stage? Is it Kraft baby food, 5 kilos of Maldon salt, Momofuku milk bar truffles and cake from NYC, or 10 gallons of water? What do you think? Okay, we've got a battle again at the top. Oh, no. Water's winning now. Let's see. All right. Excellent work, guys. Excellent work.
Bravo. Natalie. Which one do you want to go with?
Well, we could start with Natalie and your story about Momofuku.
I use a lot of apps. I love everything about David Chang. I want to meet him. So if you can hook it up, holler at me.
He's not here this year. Or ever.
Just in case you're here, come and meet me. I ordered a Momofuku birthday cake for myself with no occasion. I wanted it, and I know it travels well because I've seen Chef's Table. I know that they freeze them and whatever, and they ship them over here. I think I paid more in shipping than I paid for the actual cake. My cake's like $50, but the shipping was like $45 or something, and that's on an app. Yeah.
Cool.
It was good though. It was really worth it. I love everything they do. The milk bar place, it's amazing, and actually they can overnight it to you, so that's legit.
Natalie, tell us
Hot
about
tips.
Kraft baby food, because that was actually something you've also ordered online.
What do you mean by Kraft?
It was that baby food meal kit thing.
Oh, the artisanal free-range ones?
Yes, that one.
Yes. So I get the Little Foodies Club. It's like baby food to expand your baby's palate. If you want to, like, I don't know, make them food critics or something. So they have, like, a starting one, which has, like, 1 spice per baby food, and the next ones are, like, more complex with, like, a couple spices maybe and a couple ingredients. And I also get Yummy, which is some new baby food app, where they make it and then they ship it to you. They all look really pretty. And I don't care if I eat garbage food. I want my babies to eat the best food.
It's funny because you told us on the phone that you put Gerber and the Honest Company's baby food in the same category.
Yeah.
And this was something completely different.
The Dishonest Company. They're crap. I mean, they just hide their ingredients. But if you go around Googling every ingredient like I do, they do use corn syrup solids. It's just all the way at the end instead of the second ingredient like the other brands. But everything's super pasteurized, and it ends up being just sugar for the most part. I can just feed my babies sugar water, and it'll probably get the same results. So I try to look for things that are just, I guess, more local and seem more inspiring. Because I don't think, like, what kind of people are you bringing up if you're starting your baby off on, like, this bland, just full of sugar and chemical food? I mean, I'm sure we all grew up on it, or we had breast milk, but it can't be good for you to grow up like that and just, like, setting, like, a poor example for the rest of your life, an indelible example. So let's make better baby food.
Thanks for sharing that, Natalie. Just one more. The Malden salt was you, Giovanni, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, no, actually, salt is one of my favorite things to buy. It's just because you can get the very best Malden sea salt. It feels like you're buying some super premium product, and you're paying like $3 for it or something. So I always enjoy buying that. And on Amazon, I buy kind of all the pantry items that last forever. I can buy in huge, like the restaurant size quantities, and just have them there. And yeah, for some reason there's something oddly satisfying about. And I've only actually gotten this delivered once. I'm still working my way through it. But having it there and having kind of a supply probably for the rest of my life of sea salt.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Great. So I think, is there one more question?
No.
That's it. Great. So can we check on Slido if there are some questions that came up for our
Poll.
contestants?
We don't have time for the lightning round.
We're going to pass through it.
Sorry, you all. But were there
You're
any
gonna have to guess.
maybe one or two questions for the panelists that we might take from the crowd? Yeah, you guys don't know what Beach Town Taco is. Don't sweat it. These are old questions.
Old questions.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions for anyone who's on stage?
We might have time for one or two.
We've got one way up in
questions.
the rafters. I'm not sure.
Here, can I steal this from you for a second?
Great.
Have you tried the Bob's Challenge?
Giovanni. Okay. Ma'am.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it was for Tessa. What categories do you usually shop at Trader Joe's?
What categories do you shop at Trader Joe's?
Absolutely. My favorite categories to shop at Trader Joe's are, they don't have a very extensive produce department. You're nodding. In terms of fruits and vegetables, it's just a couple blocks from my house, so that's one of the places. So one of the reasons why I supplement with apps like Good Eggs are to get very seasonal, fresh pomegranates, and especially in the autumn, I love having all those fresh vegetables. So I like to be there to understand how I can, in terms of fruits, I feel they're not good. I think in vegetables, I think they're very consistent. I love being able to get my entire bag of spinach for $1.99 for the whole week. I live with myself in an apartment, so it's going to last me. I love the salads, I love the soups. I like the ability to have good inspiration in terms of fresh meals. So like their fresh pastas, I really enjoy. Their house-made breads are one of my favorites. The cheeses, I think, are a little bit pricey. Their wines are affordable, so I love those. The thing that I don't go to Trader Joe's for are the seafoods, because I eat a lot of seafood, but I think that they're a little bit pricier than other places where I've been. But I think that they're trying to be a lot more thoughtful about and affordable in terms of what they're doing around refrigerated and fresh fruits, produce, vegetables. I get a lot of lentils. I love lentils and beans, like you're saying. So you can get like a whole thing of lentils that could last you a week for like a very cheap price. And they have a lot of different varieties, like yellow and red and split versus whole. So I think that's a great opportunity. Rarely, but I do frozen sometimes. Yeah, frozen sometimes. Frozen. So my favorite thing, and they have like this wonderful. It's called the superfood quinoa. It has sweet potatoes and carrots and quinoa and beans. I don't know if you've seen it. That's my favorite one. The pilaf, yeah, that's my favorite. You
Looks
don't
like
like it?
that's
I
more than one.
love it. I love it, actually. And I add sometimes, but I always add to everything because I love flavor. My family's from Brazil and Uganda, so I love flavor. I love things to be interesting, so I love that as a base. But I always am adding vegetables and garlic and spice and a little bit of salt.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm always adding things to it. But I think it's a good superfood idea just to get me started, because for $3 I have like all these superfoods right here that are apparently supposed to be 3 servings, but I eat 3 servings. So it's like great. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tessa.
We only have a couple more
1
minutes
minute.
left before this closes, so we wanted to ask you all, what do you think these 3 folks have in common? Why are they all here on the stage together?
Gonna yell it out. We
They
wish.
do not work for IDEO. Anybody?
All right. Well, we heard somebody yell that they're millennials. Who said that they're millennials?
We had a couple of people.
Yeah. So can you give us a reason why? What you guessed?
Ding, 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 ding.
So we've heard a lot about this already in our conference, which just goes to show, which is the point that we're making, is that a lot of times we get asked, okay, what are millennials thinking? Our target is a millennial, and this is not a homogenous group. In fact, any group or demographic that you're thinking about isn't a homogenous group, but rather when you start to dig in and get personal stories from people, you learn that people have different modes. So similar to what was spoken about before about a psychographic, that maybe it's not even in a specific age category, but rather mindsets that transcend them. So for us in our work, what we really want to do, sure we fix our microphone, which I can't find. That might make it weird. Just put it back on. Okay. So in our work, what we really want to do is focus on stories of real people and learn about their lives in a way that we can be inspired by the things that they do. So hearing the stories that you heard on the stage today, hopefully you heard a few things that surprised you or that were interesting to you or that were unexpected, and really that's the starting point for us to design things that connect with people at an emotional level instead of looking at just a homogenous group of people that doesn't really have anything to latch onto in terms of opportunities for where we can design and build things.
Yeah, and I think we've been sitting here, Chioma and I, in the audience the last day and a half, saying, oh my God, people are already sharing all the things that we're going to share, and they've backed it up with large surveys and data. And I think what's amazing about doing qualitative research in addition to quantitative research and not looking at them as 2 separate things is we uncovered a significant amount of similar richness and key takeaways that you all have heard from other folks, but actually just spending about an hour with each one of these people and actually getting to know them and really digging into who they are. So we want to remind you all that it's not just about surveys and quantitative, but if you're going to design something new and create something new for people, be inspired by real people, spend time with them, get to know them, and thank them very, very much for being here today and coming up. And so we all hope you had a nice time with us. Our time is up, but if you want a deeper introduction to IDEO or talk to more folks, the IDEO team is, a lot of them are here, so the IDEO team, you just raise your hands and people can find you after, come say hi, and we'll be thrilled to talk to you about how we do research, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Baby.
This is Uncut with Matt Ab. This is Uncut with Matt Abdu at Pig Bleecker in the West Village of New York City. Having two restaurants is really kind of special for me because I get to really focus on all of my loves of cooking. Pig Beach is our Brooklyn barbecue spot, which focuses mostly on traditional barbecue but with our New York City twist to it. And Pig Bleecker is our refined, smoke-centric comfort food restaurant where we're taking all that theme from barbecue, but refining it to make it something more unique. So I am half Italian, half Lebanese, and I grew up my entire life with the Lebanese side telling me to sa'tain and the Italian side telling me to manja, both of which just mean eat, live, love, be happy. There was no greater representation of love in my family than through food. It just really made me who I am today. Today we're making a smoked pastrami pork leg with a sweet and spicy barbecue mustard sauce. This dish plays very well on our menu here because all the processes of brining, rubbing, and smoking just create such depth of flavor that it really jumps off the palate the second you eat it. And when people see brined, smoked, rubbed pastrami ham, it's one of those things that just jumps out in their mind of, oh wow, I want to try this. So we take the outside muscle of a fresh leg of pork and we first begin by brining it in a traditional pastrami brine. In our pastrami brine we have water, salt, brown sugar, cure number 1, black pepper, pickling spice, and smashed garlic. After it's brined, we pat it dry, season it pretty liberally with a house-made pastrami rub. The rub is what's really giving us all that delicious pastrami flavor and pizzazz. That combined with the smoke is what really separates this from being a traditional ham and making it something really unique. Our pastrami rub has kosher salt, ground coriander, butcher grind black pepper, sweet paprika, granulated garlic, granulated onion, Coleman's mustard powder, and light brown sugar. Season that pretty liberally, and then we place it in our smoker. Remove it from the smoker around 135 degrees. Let it rest for an hour and a half to carry up to about 145 degrees before serving. The mustard has yellow mustard, white granulated sugar, light brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, ketchup, kosher salt, Worcestershire sauce, granulated onion, granulated garlic, Frank's Red Hot, and ground black pepper. The outside muscle of this fresh pork leg is just smothered in love, from the brining process to the rubbing process to the smoking process, and then the applications are really endless in what you can use it for. It can be sliced paper thin and put in a Cuban sandwich, or it can be sliced and let on its own to be representative of a ham board with our country hams. It has all that love just wrapped up into one beautiful protein. So our Cuban sandwich has mustard sauce, house-cured pickles, our pastrami smoked pork leg, a roasted pork loin, and melted Swiss cheese. You're getting not only that succulent, smoke-roasted ham and pork loin, but you're also getting that crisp texture of acidity of the pickles and that mustard with the unctuous cheese. It just really plays super well when you griddle that bread and it's got that crunch. It just makes you want to keep biting back for more. Me personally, I would love to eat some sliced ham steak or a Cuban sandwich with a rosé or even Pinot Noir if you wanted to go that heavy. Food has that unique ability to make you just feel warm and good or put a smile on your face, and I love that all my life.
Thank you, Natalie. Take care, okay? No.
everyone. Oh. Can we get a live mic? Can we get a live mic?
All right, everyone, we are going to get started so that we're not late for lunch. We've got priorities at this conference. So if everyone could take their seats. We are going to have a panel session, which I love, that is designed and driven by the MIT Media Lab, so you know it's going to be good. We will be taking Slido questions, so your questions will pop up on that screen. So open slido.com again, RTF17. Is the event code. So our moderator extraordinaire for this panel is Jonathan Brill. Jonathan is the futurist at HP, which is such a cool title. So he works across all departments at HP to think about future and innovation planning in the organization. He is obsessed with science and gustatory perception, and that research has been featured in National Geographic, on restaurant menus, and also at TED conferences. So welcome, Jonathan.
I am Jonathan Brill. I think she did a nice intro of me. There's some wonderful people coming up to talk about the future of supply chain, both globally, what's going to happen, and I think more importantly, domestically, how is our supply chain going to change in the next number of years, and how will that impact the food that we serve, we deliver, and that we sell. So Caleb, come on up. So Caleb is at the MIT Media Lab. He runs the Open Egg program, and I can probably talk for a second about himself.
No, I can talk for a lot more than a second. Am I on? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I lead a group now that composes geneticists, flavor chemists, dietitians, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, computer scientists, data scientists. It goes on and on to architects and urban planners. And we're working on technology for control environment agriculture, so growing things in buildings or growing things in control. And then we're also learning on moving the knowledge from that into field. So I can talk about some of those projects related to our work.
And Layla is at Wise Systems, which deals with routing trucks and fleets of vehicles around the country. So tell us about what you're up to.
Yeah, hi guys. It's great to meet you all. Wanted to come in with a bang. So, as everybody on this panel knows very well, and honestly, as many of you probably know very well, currently we live in an environment where consumers have very high demands within the supply chain, right? So you expect that you can order something on Amazon and know exactly when it's going to arrive, or you can order an Uber and literally for $10 see your guy drive up to your front door and get a text message when it happens. But the reality is with larger organizations that run supply chains in the last mile, this type of efficiency isn't realized. And while consumers are expecting it, the softwares are pretty archaic and outdated.
Mic went out.
Hi.
Uh-oh. Hold on.
So.
What's up there?
I don't think my mic works.
Hello. Mine works. Layla's awesome. I've been in the Amazon with Layla. Like, seriously, we've been in the Amazon, and she took a picture with an alligator in her mouth. Yeah. This girl is insane. She's from NASA and MIT. You should listen to everything that she says. But maybe we should go ahead and bring Casey.
Casey, come on up. Tell us about yourself. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right.
Right. We'll just lean in. You can just talk. All right, so after that intro, I'm Casey Carl. I run a venture and consulting practice called Northwest Ventures, but probably why I'm here was, although knowing Caleb for the last few years, I was the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at Target, and 20 years of retail experience, and was working on a lot of innovation capabilities and building up new things that retailers and organizations and brands are going to need to be prepared for the digital disruption that they're in the midst of. But also specifically, we opened up a Future of Food collab with IDEO and the Media Lab in Target over the last few years in Cambridge. And we're pursuing some really cool and radical ideas around food disruption. So,
cool. So I had a whole list of questions and whatnot to ask, and we started going and talking out. I can't quite see you, Layla. We started talking out back and just had a great time. So I thought it might actually be more interesting to just start to ask each other the questions we might be interested in asking each other, because we're all coming from slightly different parts of the world. And so I guess I'll start off with kind of the meta question, as all of us being somehow involved in technology and food, which is what are the key technologies that each of you see starting to impact the supply chain and disrupt the way that we buy, sell, and move goods around? So okay. Why don't you go, Layla?
Yeah, I think my mic is back.
You're in.
All right, perfect. So as I was noting earlier, a lot of organizations need this transparency, but the truth is delivery is could be quite expensive, and the margins on last mile are razor thin. So what we found is that within Y Systems, which is the company I co-founded, which you'll hear more about, a lot of organizations solve these routing issues by planning routes days in advance of when they send the trucks out. So you have 15,000 goods that need to be delivered and 1,000 trucks that need to deliver the goods today. So you plan yesterday, send the guy on the road today, he hits traffic, there's a Dodgers game, they lose, whatever happens, and...
Ouch. Sensitive.
The goods don't get to the customer on time. But remember, consumers now expect so much more. So what we found is that a lot of organizations are knocking on our door for efficiency within their fleet. And we particularly focus on using real-time data, historical data, machine learning patterns to make really precise and dynamic schedules throughout the day for folks with trucks who are otherwise bleeding money, quite frankly. So efficiency seems to be the name of the game right now in terms of trends for technology people are seeking.
But what you're disrupting is so old. How do they not already run on real-time data?
I
mean, I'm sitting here hearing you, and I like
well,
you.
because they don't. I mean, because they don't have real-time data, and that's the biggest thing is where the data exists. In order to extract that to a place where you can actually do something with it in real time, you need to improve your quality of your data. You need to improve the efficiency of your data, and then just be down in like nanoseconds, not seconds or minutes, or 15-minute batch processes, or overnight for some brands or retailers. I mean, a lot of it is around the data capabilities. They're very immature relative to what the consumer expectations are today, let alone where they're going to be in 5 years.
Why don't you just keep going? What else is?
So on that note, so one of my teams I ran was all of our data and analytics organization, so built up the data science capabilities at Target. And supply chain was by far our kind of biggest area of emphasis. And so in addition to the machine learning, I think AI is going to be, obviously, they kind of go part and parcel about to build the brains of a true dynamic multinodal network, which is what really brands or retailers and their supply chain systems need to behave like. Where they are today, you can look at Walmart or Target or Kroger, they're really hyper-efficient linear networks. They move from manufacturer to shelf, and that's kind of where it starts, or maybe to the consumer's front door. But what they need to be is dynamic multinodal networks where at any point demand can be filled anywhere in the most cost-efficient and consumer-friendly manner. And so that's going to require AI and machine learning. Blockchain will be coming behind that as we look at greater transparency of the entire supply chain and where goods are and where transactions take place at every step of the way. And then you've got this whole IoT thing that's going to basically allow us, the sensors, to basically map where everything is, whether that's product, whether that's consumers, whether that's employees. So I think those are some of the biggest things that will impact the supply chain. But
let me pick up a little bit.
Okay.
I know some things about that. So some of the stuff that I'm crazy freaking out about in a good way, and then also like people should know very early. We can edit organisms now very, very cheaply, very quickly, right? That's CRISPR, and that means plants, the things that we all want to eat. So that seems scary and new to people, but we're already 2 generations past CRISPR. CRISPR is becoming in general consciousness because it was litigated between MIT and some other school around here. And so that's done. That's old news. We can edit things cheaply and quickly that we never could before. We've now got gene inheritance, which is the ability to edit a gene and take it into the offspring of that plant, of that animal, whatever. That sounds scary, but that's also the elimination of things like malaria and Lyme disease and other things. So that's happened, it's proven. And then now there's the ability to spread that edit across chromosomes so that you know that if an A and a B, a female and a male, have a baby, and it's an edited baby, that when it has a baby and it has a baby and it has a baby, since it's across chromosomes, it gets washed out. So the edit you made, you can predict when it's gone. This is the world that we live in today. Nobody really talks about it, but it's designer plants, it's designer microbes, it's designer yeast. Yeast doing a lot of new production of things. They're great chemical factories. So I'm super interested in where that goes, because you can edit now for nutrition. One GMO of all time for nutrition, golden rice. You can edit for flavor. One GMO ever for flavor, called the Flavor Saver tomato. And probably none of you have eaten that, because it was some of you were, it was in the 70s. And so, like, the ability now to shift the way that we think about producing beyond yield and calories to flavor, nutrition, and sustainability, and the new supply chains that will bring. When people are marketing new products now, they're like, my product has a health benefit. My product is a flavor benefit. They're not saying my product is jumbo-sized and cheaper. So like this ask from the consumer is also at a time when the digital bioconvergence is really new. And so I'm excited about that and where that will go.
So what I'm hearing is that we're moving past sort of these linear supply chains of the past towards these more multinodal supply chains that look something a lot more like the internet. Yep. At the same time, we're designing more and more specific products that can grow in different regions, have different characteristics for increasingly smaller groups of consumers. That's fascinating, because all of this is happening in the last 5 years. And it's all, a lot of it's startup technology. Some of this is moving into larger, in the food space, investors like ConAgra in the supply chain space. Some of it moving toward bigger investors like IBM. But it's all like kind of really emergent right now. What needs to happen for corporations to play in this space effectively and stitch together this new way of doing things? And what happens if they don't?
Maybe Layla, could you jump in with who you're working with and what you're doing?
Yeah, so we're working with some pretty large organizations along the scales of Anheuser-Busch, for example. If you get beer that they distribute, we got it too with our technology. So that's the type of organization we're working with, and the type of organization we'd like to work with as well. If anybody has trucks, come find me. Shameless plug. But the interesting thing about these systems as they scale, and something to keep in mind, is that while it's becoming a much more dynamic system for delivery, the way that a lot of delivery is conducted today is very dependent upon these static routes that then put all the onus on the driver to get things on time. So even as you talked about the future and how the future of the supply chain might look, and we're looking at things like autonomous vehicles, blah, 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 the reality is right now that the driver Joe who drops things off at the Whole Foods on Main Street knows not to get there before 7. He knows the owner leaves the key under the mat. You wouldn't believe some of this stuff. He knows not to go at 8 a.m. because there's a Miller Coors truck there. And he knows not to get there between 10 and 10:15 because his merchandiser won't be there. So these guys are processing all this tribal knowledge that, quite frankly, an autonomous vehicle just would never know about and would be pretty useless without. So we're very focused on, okay, if Joe knows all this stuff, and in fact all the other 15,000 Joes within your organizations, and Donnas, sometimes there's female drivers, though it's rare, we want to know that, and we want that to be a part of these algorithms that will make you smarter, cheaper, more efficient, but also better for your customers. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You want to pick it up?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry about being directive. I just know you guys so well that I'm like, holy cow, this is a home run for.
Just point. I think that the biggest things are, to piggyback on that, it's when you're talking about routing and smarter routing and things like that, but you have to look way upstream to that and to say, what we are building is the brains that look at those components and optimize for those for both profit and efficiency and consumer experience and speed to consumer, and markdown avoidance, potential switchability, all these other dynamics that are outside of the supply chain, but we live in a world where the supply chain is a consumer-facing experience. And for most organizations, that is a huge paradigm shift. that they're still grappling with, in addition to many others, like the consumers have the power, not you. So stop operating in a push society. We operate in a pull society, and they'll interact when they want to on their own terms. And you better have all the requisite capabilities in order to enable those experiences when they're ready to happen. So I think part of it is also finding that the supply chain has a very different role to play than it ever did, in addition to being hyper efficient to make sure that you can squeeze out every basis point of profit in what is many times razor thin margins for organizations. So I think there's major paradigm shifts that have to take place, and until those are kind of adopted in terms of the new paradigms of what role supply chain means in terms of your experience or your brand, but also the requisite capabilities that need to sit around that, I think organizations are going to continue to flounder, and you're going to see a lot of share shift out of traditional kind of brands and retailers.
So as a retail leader and former senior executive in a retail organization, how do you manage that change? You clearly see what's happening. How do you manage that change? How do you push it through? How do you encourage people who may have interests in the existing systems to make
That's
new
the number
choices?
one question on our slide right now.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Biggest
well, I
hurdles.
mean, the biggest thing for retailers or for brands or just existing institutions, they have to get out of their own way. And there's a reason why most transformations fail. Their batting average is pretty poor. And it's because the culture, and we've all know the culture and read a lot about culture and what it means for innovation, it truly kills the innovation before it ever has a chance to really blossom. And so the best organizations understand that, and they create as much protection and autonomy as possible from those that own the core paradigm of today. And then they also have to infuse the right talents with the right mindsets that have a new way of thinking about new models and new paradigms, so that they can actually enable these things to happen over time and figure out how to integrate and ultimately replace kind of their core business models of today.
Does this model of taking money from R&D and putting it into VC funds that we've seen the big 5 food companies do over the last 5 years, is that the layer of autonomy that you need? And is that what you're talking about, or you mean internal to the organization?
I think I'm speaking more internally. I think that's certainly a means to do it externally, and I think it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. I think for most organizations, they're going to have to do that and it's going to be many things happening simultaneously, but each one of them requires a cultural change in terms of are they open with sharing their data externally? If not, well, you're in a world of hurt. Are you open with the consumer having more controls in your experience or not? Are you open to provide greater transparency end to end of your experience? And that means you're going to reveal a lot of warts. And are you prepared for that? So I think they've got to wrestle with a lot of these things that are really cultural and talent-driven and mindset-driven and have nothing to do with the requisite capabilities. That's a whole different thing.
So I'm seeing that similar, I don't always know the right jargon, but what would you call Ferrero Rocher? That's a packaged good company. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. CPG.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just,
packaged goods.
So that's a company that I work with, and they're driving the change in the supply chain, which is pretty interesting, right? Because they're a consumer of hazelnuts, right? But they didn't necessarily own hazelnut farms and operate because it's so big that they have to rely on a ton of middlemen. I see a thing happening between that project that I'm working on with hazelnuts and also a project that I'm working on in cotton with Wellspun, which is the world's largest cotton manufacturer out of India. They're going much deeper into their supply chains than they've gone before, and they're open to being open about it. Because you're not asking the supply chain to become transparent. A lot of the supply chain people, growers and things, may not want to be very transparent because that's where their edge lies in a lot of cases. That's where they find their margin. But when you have that CPG or whatever company is buying the thing, now investing, like with Ferrero Rocher, all of our data from what we grow on hazelnuts is open source. And they've agreed to that. When I worked with you, it was all about open source and sharing that. And so I feel like that transparency is being driven by either the retailer or the CPG, but less being developed in the actual supply chain. I don't know if you see that too or not.
I think in the best organizations that's happening, but we can speak to the examples of what we are working on.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why we're referring to it in the past tense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, is that we were doing all these things that were open source and sharing the data globally and then bringing in a lot of different partners and dramatically different ways of working. And then you have organ rejection to say, well, we've got a $20 billion food business today. Like, why is our grocery team not involved in this? And it's like, well, because they're going to screw it up. That's why. And so for the right organizations, they have to be able to give them the autonomy and the freedom to go move from exploration to actually landing on something that could be brought back. And many times that requires bringing in third parties or outsourcing it or leveraging VCs or others to do that, because the requisite capabilities and culture don't exist within the organization.
So we've just covered a tremendous amount of content. So supply chain innovation, culture shift, new funding models, right? The example that pops to the top of my mind when we start talking about this is the Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods, and how that new supply chain, how that new funding model, how that new culture shift is going to impact and compete with a large organization like Walmart in the food space. Because you might not know this, but food is really the flywheel that drives Walmart's profitability. So this move of Amazon into the last channel, the last category that Walmart participated in, that Amazon didn't, it's pretty significant. It's going to shake up the way retail supply chains work.
Well, what I've seen so far in our conversations with Amazon is how much trouble they were having in fresh. That was kind of a known quantity that they couldn't get you. You could click a lettuce faster than they could grow it and send it to you. And so now the thought is, what can be produced urban or peri-urban, still at a profit, because of the desire to get you a fresh, good-tasting product. And that's a lot of things that are highly perishable, but also matched with good amount of margin, because they can't get you the things that are low margin and fresh to you very quickly. That's very hard. So it seems like what I would guess would start happening is you have a lot of assembly going on in Whole Foods, and a lot of people picking that up as the things that they wanted. But very close by, you have growing of things like berries, growing of things that suffer the most in transportation. The fact that you guys get berries from your grocery store and in 2 days they're moldy, or they're moldy when you get them. There's a lot of things that are already not working about the grocery fresh model that they're going to try to innovate on.
Yeah, no, the comments that I was thinking about, I was actually just reading, and it's separate from this topic, this question of who's leading last mile efficiency right now and why. So I'm going to segue a little bit. But I think that in terms of last mile efficiency, it's clear that there are some people who do it very well, or better than I would say a lot of the models that already exist. So you see the Amazons of the world, right? Or really Amazon. The Amazon of the world. So I'm not going to necessarily, there are different leaders in last mile efficiency. They have their whole operation in-house. I don't think that's the best way to answer this question. Really, the best way to answer this question is to say that if you're not keeping up with it, you'll be dead in the water. Or you're going to have somebody else do your last mile for you. So the reality is that a lot of the drivers who drive for organizations that own tons of trucks are getting older. A lot of this is tribal knowledge. The routers take hours and hours and hours to build routes. Sometimes it takes months to plan them on how to build an efficient route. On top of it, the drivers are retiring, and young people don't want these jobs. Even the routers, young people don't want these jobs. So all this tribal knowledge is going out the window, and in already a razor-thin margin industry. So the reality is that within your organization, you're going to have to capture all of this knowledge and apply it back to the static routes you're creating to make sure the next generation can do as good of a job as the other guys who will get you out of business if you don't figure it out.
That's a crazy parallel, because the average age of a farmer is 60 in the U.S., and there's less than 2% of the people in this country involved in agriculture. But I really want to hear what you have to say about the Amazon deal.
Yeah, I think a couple things on the deal itself, and we talked a little bit about this kind of earlier this morning. I think there's two things that are really important to understand in terms of the deal itself. One is obviously the 400-plus stores and where they're located. I mean, to have a fulfillment center called a store in Columbus Circle, that's a good place to be if you're servicing Manhattan. But the other part is the fresh food capabilities. That was Amazon's Achilles heel. That they've been trying for years, and now they just acquired experts in that. They can help Whole Foods on their pricing and all that stuff. They've got the balance sheet to easily do that. But it's the fresh food supply chain capabilities and understanding that, and how critical that is to the experience and the freshness and the quality. Now they have that. And they have 400-plus stores now that are deployed in consumers' backyards, where most of the demand in the U.S. is met in large urban centers, and that's where the growth is going to be. So now, if they can get trucks running because they have the frequency of food, everything else rides for free. So the unit economics look far more favorable when you have food going to every house. And then you just blanket a geography with the trucks. And then everything else, the sweaters, the TVs, or everything else rides for free.
Sure.
And that's why food's so important.
And that points to a truly new way of doing business.
For sure.
Maybe 10 years ago, I worked with a grocery store that had bought pick and place equipment. They'd spent all their billions of dollars doing that, and then they couldn't afford to figure out how to make last mile work.
Yep.
And this might actually be the trick.
For sure, but for the
I can just jump in real quick on the last mile thing, because I go to these kind of updates with Amazon every once in a while, and I can tell you the last one, there were about 10 robots that were bipedal robots. They were already looking at overcoming obstacles, already looking at, you saw the thing that they announced about putting lock at your door? I forget what it's called. There's something, of course, because they're going to have a robot that drops it off, there. And so I'm just curious, it's not science fiction. It sounds like science fiction, but I've seen them. And so I'm wondering how quickly we're going to be coming closer to that. From the distribution point of view, you were talking about, Layla, drivers getting older, blah, blah, all the stuff that I talk about farming. Is this a 3-year vision? Is it a 5-year? Is it farther than that? Is it closer? I don't know. Anybody like that question? Maybe it's a horrible question.
It's a great question.
It's a question I'm interested in, being in sort of the Silicon Valley bubble. Yeah. It's a 3-year vision for me. Right. But how does that scale? There are 7 or 10 cities in the country, I think, now that have rules about having robots on sidewalks and are starting to look at these issues.
I mean, I think that we are still years out from mass adoption for a variety of reasons, and the legislature will be one of those things where the technology is always going to go faster than the laws change. Unions are another, and unionized labor forces and things like that. All of these things will be impediments to the speed, but we'll be seeing a lot of things in the next 3 years that are essentially going to define the supply chain and that last mile experience for the next 20 years. But that's also where, and I want to come back to this specific question, but it's also where retailers and grocers that have hundreds, if not thousands, of stores deployed, this is still their greatest leverage that they have that they need to fully take advantage of, because they're in every consumer's backyard within minutes.
Right.
And for those that aren't just traditional grocers, they also have a diversity of their product portfolio that can offset the margins of just food. Even Walmart, that's 52 or 54% food, they've got 48% that's something else.
Right.
Target has a lot more than that. And so there's things you can play in terms of other profit pools that you can take advantage of.
And they own Kiva Systems.
And they own Kiva,
The craziest robotics company.
Go ahead.
No, I want to echo your thoughts. I would definitely agree. And I think that one really important pressure point here is just consumers. Like you said, the supply chain is now a very consumer-facing chain.
That goes to the number one question on Slido, just so you know.
Oh, I actually think you're the guy to answer that.
No. You take that one and what you were talking about, because I'm curious if you're seeing a breakup of the routes. Are the routes becoming different because of people wanting local at all, or are you facing that pressure or not yet?
Not yet. We don't really deal with point of sales. We just get the goods to wherever they need to be cheaply. 80% reduction in late deliveries, 13% reduction in miles, in case anybody's wondering.
She's taking sign-ups in the back of the room later.
One of the things I see popping up here is we're all, is a large computer manufacturer. A lot of our clients are, large. Target, a lot of your partners are large.
Yep.
Trucking, fleet, a lot of your partners are large. Media Lab, a lot of your partners are large. What's happening with small to medium-sized businesses? How are they going to be impacted by these changes, and what strategies might they have for competing?
So I've seen models where organizations have independent distributors, and I personally think the independent distributors, who tend to own less trucks than the organizations themselves but distribute the goods on their behalf, are quite threatened because they really need the numbers to work in order to keep the operation going, and there's very little room for failure. So that's something I've been keeping a close eye on, and we definitely go to help, because the faster you can solve these problems, the better their margins are. But I think that it'll be more challenging if you really can't save every dollar.
Yeah, I think for the largest of the large are well positioned to take advantage of these macro trends, and it's still a threat to them, but I think they can actually take advantage and do something positive with it. I think the smaller organizations that are very nimble are still well equipped if they have a very good value about what they provide. HEB is certainly not a small organization, but they have tremendous loyalty and they're private, so they have the luxury of actually being able to invest in the right things that I think will really help them. But I contrast that with a lot of really crappy experiences of small to mid, and it's like, well, if it's not a great experience today, and you're not going to attract the right talent or find the right partners to help you for tomorrow, yeah, you're in a world of hurt. And so I think small and mid can be an advantage with the right experience, with the right ability to attract talent, and certainly being private allows you the flexibility to go invest in terms of what's necessary. But I think outside of those conditions, I'd be very threatened.
So I think the threat probably happens on both sides as well. I think producers are going to be automating, small producers are going to be able to increasingly automate their capabilities, provide specialty product that large agricultural producers, for instance, won't. And sell direct. So, for instance, I have a farmer who I do some work with in Ohio. He ships me product literally picked 15 minutes before it goes in the box with a cool chain all the way to my house. It's the best produce, like, literally on the planet. They serve 800 of the top 1,000 restaurants in the world. I feel like that
I want to eat at your house.
Yeah. Right. I feel like that shift, like that's obviously a uber luxury good, but that shift is going to start taking place across the supply chain, where as you have increasing transparency because of track and trace and so on and so forth, producers are able to run around the hub and spoke channels they used to. What does that look like?
Well, the supply chain plus that top question plus this one for locally sourced. What's been interesting to me is, like, in the United States, you eat like 4 cultivars of tomatoes, for example. You have like 10,000 cultivars of tomatoes that you could be eating. We from our partners, and like you mentioned, the Media Lab is predominantly funded from corporate partners. It's a consortium model, so it's all the biggest companies that you can imagine, but also like Gucci and stuff like that. It's super weird. Point is, what I've been asked for from food companies that we work with is an on-demand supply chain. That concept is not existent in agriculture, right? Like, farmers need to know what they're growing, how much it's going to be, because they have a risk that they're taking on every single year. They're hedging. If you guys don't know that farmers are incredibly sophisticated already, spend time on a real farm where they're making money, because they're playing futures markets. Farmers are playing futures markets. So, like, I keep running into this idea that, like, farmers aren't really incredibly entrepreneurial, but they are. But the point is, take somebody like a Campbell's. Campbell's wants to have access to all different kinds of tomatoes because their consumer is asking for locally sourced tomatoes, heritage variety tomatoes, these tomatoes, that tomatoes. This is not our supply chain at all. We are set up totally different. So I think that desire, if you just simply won't buy it, if it doesn't taste good, like, you'll drive the change. It's already happening. And so I'm being asked, how do we build this an on-demand supply chain for different sorts of things? Mm-hmm.
So you go for
no.
it. I didn't have anything to say. I can ask another question.
Yeah, sure.
Well, just,
all right,
just
so
one other thing. Just
okay.
on the last, I think the other thing to realize is that this isn't the future we're talking about. This is not the next few years. Like the craft beer industry is the blueprint for what's going to happen across every kind of cohort of food systems. It's like, well, it's already there.
Yeah.
And again, consumers' expectations are just going to roll across where their consumer dollars are going. It's like, if it's craft beer and they want local and they're willing to pay for it, and the supply chain better enable that, and it's going to hit every other part of what sits on the table.
Would you?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to ask if you would agree that, like, sorry, Layla.
You're good.
We know each other. It's fine.
Well.
Would you agree that, like, the supply chains of the future cannot be as opaque as they are now?
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, I keep talking to people and they keep working on it, but then at the end of the day, it's like, well, where's the IP? Where are we holding the IP in this? How are we, finding our edge? Like, is that a moot point, or, like, is there different IP that comes in an open supply chain, or, like, I'm just curious, like, if companies really believe that, because it seems like they do, and it seems like you can't lie anymore about anything or hide anything because we can all Google it. So.
Right. I think the expectation will be for greater transparency. I think most companies, understand, and most of them even openly acknowledge that this is where things are going, including the supply chain, not just the supply chain.
Yeah.
And yet internally, I think they're really grappling with, that means relinquishing control. That means basically democratizing all of our data, and that means inviting a lot of risk that might come with that as well. And I think that's really scary for a lot of organizations to wrestle with. But even with all that, it's still going to happen. And other technologies, blockchain will be one of those that really help enable that. Like consumers will demand it, and then people will have to follow. And those that are late followers are going to be kind of left on the wayside.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And honestly, somebody had asked about, locally food and distribution amongst local food. That question is gone now, so I can't repeat it. But I don't think that the supply chain discriminates. If you have an organization with demand and a certain amount of fleet in my world, you need to be using technology to keep it efficient or you'll be out of business. It's just economics at the end of the day. You have to make more than you spend.
So there's a couple questions starting to pop up here around food insecurity, and I think that's so we've gone large company, mid-sized company, small-sized company. It's all going to be like microbrews. All right, let's pop up to the macroeconomic sphere for a second.
The Caleb Harper question.
So we have it's hard to imagine kind of the world of 15 years from now, but 80% of the global middle class isn't going to be in the United States. It's not going to be in Europe. It's not going to be in Japan. It's going to be in India. It's going to be in China. In China, they're building, so they're going to have something like 15 megacities. So that's half the population of the United States moving toward middle class lifestyles in cities. The size of a New York or a San Francisco or in LA. I mean, that changes the complete game. If we move toward our current approach to delivering food, we need 2 or 3 planets to actually just farm and get that food to market. So it seems like there are a couple of things that we're talking about. There's efficiency. There's Caleb's the growing guy. And you're talking about delivery and sales and how do you actually get food to market? So how does this change on the global scale? What we're talking about today, does this get adopted overseas first, or does this get adopted here first?
I think it's going to happen, and it's already happening overseas first. And so when you have legacy countries, and the U.S. would be one of those, you have legacy infrastructure. And so Europe and the U.S. are certainly fall into that description. And it's far harder to overcome legacy institutions and legacy infrastructure than when you just don't have infrastructure, period. And so you can go to India today, and some of my former teams at Bangalore, we work through this all the time. You're not replacing anything. There's a demand and a growing kind of middle class that wants these things. Many of them have access to the West, and they know what happens, but they want it on their own terms. And so you don't want to drive an hour and a half to go 5 miles down the road. You just want it brought to your house because it's like there's just so much friction already in their infrastructure. Just bypass that infrastructure. And so I actually think they're much better positioned to just leapfrog and just build the right infrastructure going forward to enable this. And that means changing where the source is, changing all the last mile logistics that are hyper optimized for a kind of a mega city, if you will, and then everything in between. They're just going to replace with a whole new model altogether.
So I definitely have some thoughts on this then. But first of all, Naughty Noah, I can't stop looking at your name on this, and so I want to answer your question at some point. But like, who picks Naughty Noah? I mean, it is not. Oh, it's Nai. Okay, that's my mind. I have a dirty mind. Dirty mind. So anyway, back to the point. I had an interesting conversation, and this is going to sound like a name drop thing, but I want to name drop it because that shows that it is kind of an interesting one. It's not just me making stuff up on stage for you. With Kofi Annan about what my work could do in Africa. And the first thing that I said was it's not appropriate for the African subcontinent because it's too expensive right now. It's not really economically viable anywhere in the world, despite what claims you may have read sometimes. And then it's also just going to break a lot, and there's a lot of local knowledge missing to be able to implement it. And he shared with me exactly what you said. He was like, everyone looks at sub-Saharan Africa to emulate what the United States is doing and increase efficiency in percentage points below 1 to 2 to 3 percentage points. And he's like, we're not interested in that. We want to leapfrog exactly what you guys have built. We don't have that, so we can start again. Right. And the other thing that he reminded me was, relative to my work, was that half the population of Africa is under 18, and 80% don't want to be farmers. And they're a continent of 1 to 5 acre farmers because of tribal inheritance rights. And so what does it mean when 80% of your young people aren't going to return to the small farms of which they once grew food? So just getting young people, and they're all going into the city. So on the Millennium Development Goals and all that stuff that people talk about at Davos and other things, they're all small shareholder, farmer, and Africa focused. They don't want to be there, and they're not going to be there. They're going to be in the city. They're going to be doing different things, and we're going to have a whole different system emerge. And I think that's really, as you said, more in the Indian context right now, already happened. Mm-hmm. And so you can look there for innovations.
Mm-hmm. And just to give a sense of scale, I'm trying to remember the number in my head, but something like in 2035, 2040, 40% of the working age population on the planet is going to be in Africa. It's a continent that's by size 4 times the size of the United States. I mean, the change is going to be radical. They're not going to put in $100 trillion of infrastructure, road infrastructure like we have. They're not going to put in $400 trillion of roads. They're going to do everything very different.
I got to ask you, because I know I asked you if I could bring this up, and you were like, I don't think it's relevant, but I'm going to do it anyways. The whole thing that you started was born out of the tragedy in Iraq and trying to produce safety in these neighborhoods with infrastructure that was all blown up.
Yeah.
So how are you seeing the relationship now between the question that's being asked and where your project started? It's not where it ended up.
No.
But
so this is the backstory that Caleb's mentioning. When I was at the Media Lab back with Caleb before he ran his own division there.
When I was in a closet.
Yeah, when we were in closets, the both of us. We were both interested in. I was really.
I'm single. Go ahead.
So when I was first at the Media Lab and I'd initially met my co-founders, we were in a class where we were asked to change 1 billion lives. And my parents are Iraqi. So I'd realized that every time we'd go back home, car bombs would go off, and they'd go off in traffic, and they'd kill people. And then once the first bomb would go off, a second bomb would go off because somebody would go help, and inevitably they'd die too. So it was really a very tragic set of circumstances that was very commonplace. But there's this realization that mobile data should be able to predict patterns here. Why can't we tell when a bomb will be most likely to go off? How can we use movement to help understand trends and patterns of violence? So we really went hard on this project and actually convinced a Scandinavian car company to give us all their data in terms of where cars move and when they stop. And they said, sure, if you build a logistics platform for us, you guys see where this goes in the future. And we got really far with it and produced some pretty interesting results. And then ISIS gained a pretty strong hold in Iraq, and the car company left. They were just done with the region, or with that part of the region. I'm sure they went to more profitable places. But to kind of take this full circle, people were very open over there to using technology in these ways. I mean, when Saddam was in office, or whatever he was, people didn't have the internet. The internet came only after Saddam fell. This was the 2000s. So people adopted smartphones quickly and these lifestyles very quickly, but now everybody has a smartphone, and my cousins all look like Justin Bieber. It's absurd. But the point is they have access to this information that they got much more rapidly than we did, and they're quick to use solutions that never used to exist in the past because they're not building off of legacy platforms. They don't have these archaic logistics softwares or whatever to lead the way. In fact, nothing leads the way. But of course, there's risk there too.
Well, and you also have the global inheritance of some ethical, moral questions that we argue with, take GMO and take science in food. It's a very complicated subject, and in the United States, we have one position. In Europe, they have another. In China, they have a completely different one, which is a lot of our food has killed people and has not been safe, so we will adopt whatever the thing is that gives us the most amount of provenance to create a safe thing, and we'll try to buy that, and the same in Japan. And so, a lot of the issues that we may debate here are completely irrelevant, and the adoption in other places, and the adoption is much, much faster because there's not this kind of legacy of what is good, what is this. It's we need safe food, we need it affordable, we need it for a lot of people as quick as we can.
Right, and even the work that we were doing together, my team that was working with Caleb's team, actually, they came out of Asia, dealt with problems that they were facing directly as consumers, and as they came stateside to work with me and said, hey, we want to go work on this, and of course, the most deployment was actually overseas. Mm-hmm. Instantaneous adoption to say, as quickly as you can bring this over to Dubai, we'll take it.
Yeah. So look overseas for insight, innovation. Start tracking what's happening not in the U.S. market. We got a minute and 45 seconds.
Well, we'll get through all
so, so we'll get through all the questions. I guess my final question is, what's the thing that each of you wants to have happen in the world that supply chain can solve in 30 seconds or less?
I don't want every small organization to die, and I don't want there to be so many carbon emissions that don't need to happen on a daily basis. And most importantly, I want consumers to be satisfied with the way that they receive products. So, organizations don't die.
I guess mine is twofold. It's I think supply chain can do a lot of the heavy lifting to provide greater trust in terms of what we consume, and then also dramatically reduce waste. So that would be the two biggest things.
Mine's, if you read this statistic that I often make fun of, where it's like 80% of the American public doesn't know there's DNA in their food.
What?
So yeah, it's a USDA study, for real. Like serious, I'll send it to you if you guys want. But there's a lot of those things like that where we assume we have a bunch of knowledge that we don't have, and we're really, really generally ignorant of food systems, the general person. So I think mine is 1 billion new farmers, but it's like a roboticist farmer, a nutritionist farmer, a data scientist farmer, and then the other one is a global repository of information that they can access and use. Agriculture was the ultimate open source, and it didn't stop being that way until about 30 or 40 years ago. We can take it back, and with people demanding transparency, when you want to use machine learning and AI, you need trillions of data points, you need hundreds of thousands of trading slides, you need commons. So I think agricultural commons and 1 billion new farmers.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks so much to all of our awesome speakers this morning. Great news. It's lunchtime. I have heard there's going to be some DNA in the food today, just so everyone is on the same page. So we're going to have a lunch al fresco. It's beautiful outside. It'll be a walk-around lunch featuring many of our sponsors. And we'll actually have a donation station set up for the Napa Valley Foundation community to help some of the families hit hard by the fires, too. All right, enjoy. We'll be back at 1:30 for our Mapping Out the Future session. Thanks.
This is Uncut with Matt Abdu at Pig Bleecker in the West Village of New York City. Having two restaurants is really kind of special for me because I get to really focus on all of my loves of cooking. Pig Beach is our Brooklyn barbecue spot, which focuses mostly on traditional barbecue but with our New York City twist to it. And Pig Bleecker is our refined smoke-centric comfort food restaurant where we're taking all that theme from barbecue but refining it to make it something more unique. So I am half Italian, half Lebanese, and I grew up my entire life with the Lebanese side telling me to sa'tain and the Italian side telling me to manja, both of which just mean eat, live, love, be happy. There was no greater representation of love in my family than through food. It just really made me who I am today. Today we're making a smoked pastrami pork leg with a sweet and spicy barbecue mustard sauce. This dish plays very well on our menu here because all the processes of brining, rubbing, and smoking just create such depth of flavor that it really jumps off the palate the second you eat it. And when people see brined, smoked, rubbed pastrami ham, it's one of those things that just jumps out in their mind of, oh wow, I want to try this. So we take the outside muscle of a fresh leg of pork, and we first begin by brining it in a traditional pastrami brine. In our pastrami brine, we have water, salt, brown sugar, cure number 1, black pepper, pickling spice, and smashed garlic. After it's brined, we pat it dry, season it pretty liberally with a house-made pastrami rub. The rub is what's really giving us all that delicious pastrami flavor and pizzazz. That, combined with the smoke, is what really separates this from being a traditional ham and making it something really unique. Our pastrami rub has kosher salt, ground coriander, butcher grind black pepper, sweet paprika, granulated garlic, granulated onion, Coleman's mustard powder, and light brown sugar. Season that pretty liberally, and then we place it in our smoker. Remove it from the smoker around 135 degrees. Let it rest for an hour and a half to carry up to about 145 degrees before serving. The mustard has yellow mustard, white granulated sugar, light brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, ketchup, kosher salt, Worcestershire sauce, granulated onion, granulated garlic, Frank's Red Hot, and ground black pepper. The outside muscle of this fresh pork leg is just smothered in love, from the brining process to the rubbing process to the smoking process, and then the applications are really endless in what you can use it for. It can be sliced paper thin and put in a Cuban sandwich, or it can be sliced and let on its own to be representative of a ham board with our country hams. It has all that love just wrapped up into one beautiful protein. So our Cuban sandwich has mustard sauce, house-cured pickles, our pastrami smoked pork leg, a roasted pork loin, and melted Swiss cheese. You're getting not only that succulent, smoke, roasted ham and pork loin, but you're also getting that crisp texture of acidity of the pickles and that mustard with the unctuous cheese. It just really plays super well when you griddle that bread and it's got that crunch. It just makes you want to keep biting back for more. Me personally, I would love to eat some sliced ham steak or a Cuban sandwich with a rosé or even Pinot Noir if you wanted to go that heavy. Food has that unique ability to make you just feel warm and good or put a smile on your face, and I love that all my life.